All right, Tom McCardle. A film like Spotlight has so many moving pieces that it's easy for the narrative to sort of get jumbled. So, as an editor, how did you approach this material?
We tried to track how people were following the information, and we had a lot of screenings. We'd have one every 3 weeks or so, and we would sort of ask people afterwards, "Were you following this? Were you following that?" And it's funny when you hear the same thing from a bunch of people over a few screenings. You have to sort of do something to fix it, and there would be different things like clarity things. Like occasionally we went in and changed some. For Mark Ruffalo, we had a phone call with Michael Keaton, and we changed some of his off-camera dialogue to make it more clear why the documents were so important. And there'd be other things. Sometimes we would drop something out just to sort of speed through an area like 9/11, the post 9/11 sequence.
Mhm.
People were getting bumped by being away from the investigation for so long. And so once we dropped a scene out of there, things seemed to go a little smoother. And so we generally were tracking what people were following and not.
Right. So, how much did it change between the script and then the finished product? What were the major differences?
It was mostly pace. The original script was really good, and but we cut out about 5 scenes in the movie, plus fragments of other scenes. Some of the stuff we cut out were the scenes about the reporters' personal lives, and we found that we just wanted to stick to the investigation and keep that moving as much as possible. So, but the original script was really good. So, yeah.
Well, that's what's so interesting about the movie is that it really is very tightly wound, and it's so much of like a procedural.
Yeah.
So, talk about did you do any research into what the real case was like, or and that influenced your editing at all, or?
I didn't. No, we came we started working on this right after another film we had done, and Tom and Josh had done a lot of research in writing the script, so I let them do the research. So,
so let's talk a bit more about just juggling all these different characters, because I mean it's more of like an ensemble piece. Were there ever moments where you were thinking, I'm not giving enough screen time to this character, or I'm sort of short shrifting this person, or how did you find a good balance for that?
It was pretty well balanced in the script, but then at times later in the edit, we gave more shots to Rachel McAdams, because we felt at one point she was disappearing a little bit. And we actually, in the middle of the script, we actually dropped a scene or two that included Liev Schreiber, and that was just sort of a story consideration, but he still sort of plays a strong part nonetheless, even with the scenes we dropped out.
And then, of course, it's not just about the reporters, but you also have the victims as well. I think one of the extraordinary things about the movie is that you give them their due screen time. But, it struck me as I was watching it the second time, it's really not that much screen time when you think about it, but it feels that way.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, they have their scenes, I guess, about a third of the way through the movie, and we found that people really started connecting with the story, with the scenes with the victims, and or we actually call them survivors. And from that point on, they sort of resonated, and it just sort of that was enough. It seemed like so. Yeah.
The scene that really got me, one of them that really got me, was the scene where they go and visit the old priest who's been relocated a bunch of times.
Right.
Can you talk a bit about that scene?
Yeah, it was a scene that sort of surprised people, and he almost seems a little bit Alzheimer's-y, or a little bit out of it. But I guess that there were some documentaries that had some priests being interviewed that sort of had a similar attitude. I think we talked about one film that you had seen, and I think there was
Deliver Us from Evil, the Amy Bergman.
And I think it's definitely a scene that shakes people up, and it's sort of related to some of the interviews in that documentary, I think. So.
Well, what's extraordinary about it is, I mean, you know, it gives like a face to the monster, as it were. You know,
Yeah.
and you can kind of get a sense of why these people get moved around a lot.
Right. And also Sasha Pfeiffer, it's an interesting character because she keeps asking questions even faced with this extremely strange situation. And Rachel did a great job, I think, portraying her. So.
Hmm. I wonder what were some of your favorite scenes from the film that, you know, things that you feel you really got right, and then some things that were a real challenge for you.
I always loved the scene with Michael Keaton and Paul Guilfoyle in the bar towards the end, and I just thought that was a very interesting scene, and that was Paul Guilfoyle's first take, I think, and he was just great in it, and that was one of the fun things about this movie was you would have these actors come in for a couple scenes and just be so great, you know, and I was a real fan of his, and Stanley Tucci also. I was a huge fan of all of his scenes because he had amazing dailies that he could go through tons of dialogue very quickly and just be really effective and impressive, you know. And the montages were a challenge, but I thought they were, you know, they turned out pretty well. As far as tough scenes, the big scene towards the end where everyone's in the office with Liev Schreiber and they all talk about how they missed the story. We had tons of footage for that. They shot for a couple days, and it took a while just to get a rough cut of that scene. And but you know, ultimately, you know, it turned out okay. So.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I think that's one of the great qualities of the movie. But also, we were talking earlier about how there's so many characters in it. You know, just keeping track of all of them in one room must have been quite a headache at times.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could talk a bit more about the pacing of the film. You know, because it is sort of like a procedural, and I think one of the qualities that people like about the movie a lot is that it doesn't. What's the word I'm looking? It doesn't ramp up the suspense in a way. It just sort of lets things occur naturally. Were there ever moments where you thought, well, this is just too slow?
Well, that was always the concern, you know. And so we had a lot of screenings. We cut for 8 months, and it was always how do we keep it moving? And it was always about like we would sit behind people during the screenings and sort of feel where it was working and where it wasn't, and try to just sort of tighten things wherever it was sort of a little soft. And I think that's the responsibility of the editor and the director to make sure the film is the correct length, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
was the ending a challenge for you guys?
not so much, you know. It actually came together pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
There had been a choice to end it on Mark Ruffalo or on the wide of the group, and it seemed like the wide of the group made the most sense. And then the credits that came after the ending, that was something that Josh and Tom thought up in the middle of the editing, and I think that's pretty effective.
Yeah, in a way, that's the most disturbing part of the movie. Is, you know, it just seems like an endless list. But the reason I bring up the ending is because, you know, it's so extraordinary the way that, you know, you're going through this whole thing, and it ends with phones ringing.
Yeah.
You know, which you would think is like the most boring ending in the world. But I think it really it shows that they did their job. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, was there ever a thought of like we should continue this past that? You know, maybe show some court cases, God forbid, or, you know.
There wasn't. That was the end of the script. I mean, honestly, when I read that ending, I was like, I don't know, you know. It didn't seem like. But then once you put in all this phone rings and all the reactions and some score sort of rising on Michael Keaton's reaction, it sort of became a different thing. I didn't see it in the script. I was sort of surprised when I saw it in actuality. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
now, you've edited your fair share of feature films. You know, when you're editing a 2-hour feature, what is your process like? I mean, do you edit it all in big chunks, and then you watch the whole? I don't know if you watch the whole film every single day, but you know, in order to figure out these little things.
Well, while they're shooting, I'll be cutting, and you try to. They set up a schedule where you have to basically cut as fast as they're shooting, and so I'll be trying to cut, say, 4 minutes a day of a movie. So whenever the dailies come in, I'll try to cut a scene, cut it quickly, and then I like to. On this film, I had a little more time for my first rough cut. I had 10 weeks. So I could cut a scene, and then while I was still rough cutting, I could go back and look at it like 3 or 4 weeks later. And it's usually helpful to not see something for a little while, then see it again, because you get more critical of your work that way, right? It's like the same thing with writing, probably, right? And then once we finished the shoot, I had a couple of weeks, and I finished my rough cut, and I showed it to Tom. And then from there, we cut for another 5.5 months, and we would have those rough cut screenings every 3 weeks. And those would be very informative, and we knew what we had to work on, and then that would sort of fuel our next 3 weeks of working, and we sort of kept repeating that process. And also there were a couple pickup shoots during the edit where we got some new shots and some new scenes, and things that we could sort of little scenes in between things for information, because occasionally some information would disappear and people were having trouble following something, or we needed some transition shots or inserts and things like that. So. But it gets hard to keep watching the film for 8 months straight. It's one of the challenges of the job.
Right. Yeah. I know we kind of touched on this earlier, but I just want to kind of go a little more in depth. Yeah. Was there anything that you and Tom McCarthy had to lose in the film that you just absolutely loved, but it just didn't work in the overall film?
Not really on this film. Like I said, we cut out 5 complete scenes. And I don't really miss any of them. It's funny, on every movie, like whatever we cut out, Tom and I will talk like 2 years later, and he'll be like, I really missed that one scene, but I never seem to miss them. I don't know. I'm happy to lose whatever wasn't supposed to be there, so.
All in the job, huh?
Yeah, and sometimes we'll be up until the very last second, there'll be some scene that we're on the edge about, and then you have to sort of just go with your gut and hope you made the right decision, because like we'll have a scene that we'll have in, we'll have out, we'll have in, and then at the last second we have to sort of go, okay, let's drop it or keep it, or
And you've worked with Tom McCarthy quite a bit, so what's that collaboration like? I mean, it must be good if you keep working with him.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, he writes great scripts, and this is a great script with him and Josh Singer co-writing, and that's the big part, is like you want to have a great script, because if you don't have a great script, it's really hard to edit, because it's very hard to work on something that's not working, and then the job of the editor is to sort of talk about what's working, what isn't working, and how to fix it. And if everything's not working, it's sort of hard to talk, So, but yeah, we're sort of friends, and we hang out, and we enjoy working together, and it's one of those good collaborations that you sort of hope will happen in your career. So. Yeah.
And then on this film, I mean, you've already received an Independent Spirit Award nomination. You've got some Oscar buzz. Did you guys ever imagine, as you were sitting there cutting this movie together, that would be where you'd be ending up?
We didn't think about that at all. We were just hoping that the movie would play well and people would like it. And we had all those test screens in our edit room, and people did seem to be responding, so we were happy about that. But nobody ever said like Oscar this, Oscar that. So it's cool that we're in the conversation. So we thought it would be a good film, but we never thought about awards, because his past films, he did some great films before that sort of did okay on the indie scene, but didn't really get a lot of Oscar buzz. So.
Well, I think it just sort of shows the impact of the movie. What do you think when you watch it now? I mean, I'm sure you haven't watched it in a long time, but what was your big takeaway from it?
I'm sort of impressed by how it's playing. I watched it once after it was done at Open Road Films. I watched the DCP, the digital cinema package, just to sort of check that everything was all right. But I never watch it with an audience. It's too nerve-wracking. But I'm appreciating that people are reacting to it, and I'm happy about that. My mother has seen it 3 times in the theater, so that's cool.
Oh wow! Well, you've got one big fan, it sounds like. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on the film, and best of luck to all of you in the upcoming season.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Pleasure talking to you.
You too.